What's up, YouTube? As a follow-up to my last video, I wanted to put together a guide that contains a number of questions that you should be asking a property management company when you look to make the switch from managing units yourself to putting a property management company in place to handle those daily or monthly operations. And maybe you've never managed units by yourself, and so this should hopefully be a comprehensive guide on knowing what questions to ask when you look to make that decision. And the reason I wanted to put this video together was because I had been managing my own units and tenants by myself for 2 years, and it really just started to become too much. You know, I also have a 9-to-5 job, and trying to chase down rent payments, multiple rent payments, sometimes multiple times per month, just became too much. Mainly, I needed a tenant management system, more so from the payment side of things. I just needed that check to be there consistently every month, and I didn't want to have to chase it down. There are other programs like Zillow, apartments.com offers a ACH draft system as well, but you have to get a tenant to sign up for that, and they have to basically voluntarily do it. Versus some of these other companies that can implement late fees and things like that if they miss payments. And as a single landlord, you may not have the ability to do that by yourself, and then it just leads to a headache. I've had tenants, the tenant in my last video, for example, that went 2 months without paying one rent check, and that is not conducive to being a successful landlord and getting a good night's sleep as well. So I made the choice to call around the area to find a reputable property management company, and I put together a list of questions that should be asked during that process. And they're questions that I probably should have asked as well. I asked a number of them, but now I've developed a comprehensive list of questions so that you can feel confident in these conversations with the property manager. All right, so let's get into these questions. I broke them down into 8 different categories for us, and those include just general company questions, questions around their pricing, questions on what actions are you taking on behalf of me as a landlord, level of support questions, how are you going to be supporting me through this process, through this partnership, who can I call on, make sure that I have all the contact information for a property manager, the company itself, the person that does billing, all those kind of contacts at that company. Questions around taxes as well, and what documentation is presented to the landlord. Questions around evictions as well. How is that process handled? It's typically very painful, and a good property management company will make it a lot easier for you. Tenant placement questions. That's a really big one, and I wanted to dive into that one towards the end. And then finally, lease questions. How is the lease structured? What language is in there to protect the landlord? And we'll get into all those variances as well. So let's get into the first series of questions. Just general company questions that you should be asking whoever picks up the phone at the property management company that you're calling. It could be someone on the sales side. It could be a property manager. It could be just the front desk. And you need to be armed with questions ready to ask them so that you can make an informed decision. And if you're in sales personally, a lot of these questions just come naturally to you because you're curious and you just want to find out what the internal operations are with the other person on the phone. So one of the best things you can ask is, hey, how many properties do you have in this area? Is this a mom and pop operation where they're not going to be able to support you as you scale your business? Or do they have thousands of properties under management in the area, and you can feel confident that they know what they're doing because they have a large portfolio? What are their reviews? You can look that up online. Don't go anywhere that has under a 3-star rating. Make sure that they're in that 4 to 5 star level so that you can feel confident that other people, third-party proof, are talking highly about this organization. How many years have you been in business? Did you just start up with your buddy last year, or have you been in business for 20 years and you have solid operations internally and you know what you're doing? Because again, you're going to be physically handing keys for 1 property, 2 properties, however many it is, to these people, and you need to be able to sleep at night and know that your properties, your tenants, your investments are being taken care of. Another question, how many employees do you have? Are you the only person there and you're going to be run ragged and then you're going to quit and I'm going to be left with nobody managing my properties? Or, do you have hopefully 20, 50, 100 people at the organization that are doing this on a daily basis? What's your company revenue? Are you doing $0 a year or $1 million, 10 million? That's indicative of how successful the company's operations are, and you want to be with a company that has high revenue because they manage a lot of units and they probably know what they're doing. Now let's get into some pricing questions. If you've managed units by yourself for whatever period of time, and now you're thinking about hiring a property management company, guess what? It's not free. And it could eat a big chunk out of your profit. So you have to weigh that against what they're doing for you. And is it a valuable service? So for me, I actually found a property management company that was very affordable. They're reputable in the area. They have over 2,500 properties. You have to also do the math on what is the impact to my cash flow when I put this property management company in place. Do they take a percentage of your monthly rent? Some companies do anywhere from 5 to 10%, could be more. In this case, I got a phenomenal deal. I also negotiated a little bit, but I'm paying $65 a door for this property management company, which is awesome because that doesn't eat much into my cash flow. Some of the more expensive events are around tenant placement and marketing and getting your listing online, things like that. So you want to cover those costs as well. And then are there discounts if I bring on 2 or 3 or 4 doors? If I have a duplex or a tri or a quad, do I get a discount because I'm bringing on multiple units? The answer often is yes. So try to push that. Use some negotiation skill and some sales ability to get your cost down, because it's going to eat directly into your take home. So you want to make sure that it's relatively inexpensive and they're providing a lot of value on the flip side. But find out when you receive your funds each month. For me, it takes a little bit of time, about 2 weeks into the month, which is not terrible. Again, I don't really care when the money hits. I just need it and have it be reliable. So it usually hits about the middle of the month for me, which is fine. But just find that out so that you know when it's coming. Another good question is who's going to hold and collect the tenants' deposits, because there's liability and legality around that. You have to keep it in a separate bank account. It's best if the property management company just does that for you. Then you don't have to worry about it. It's never added to any of your funds. On the backside when a tenant moves out or you need to take money out for repairs, the property management company can handle all of that for you. And ask about, am I getting monthly statements? Do I get to see my income and the breakdown of the fees associated? When is that delivered each month? Do you do that? Or do I log into a portal online so I can view everything? Can I download statements? Things like that, so that you can in the future take it to a CPA if needed, or just for your own personal records. So the third set of questions, these are questions around actions. What action items are you taking on my behalf? And this was a tough one for me to justify the cost, because I was thinking, hey, I've already done everything for the last 2 years. I played maintenance guy and I collected the rent. I was dealing with tenant issues and things like that. So what are you doing if I'm paying you monthly to prove value to me? So questions around how is maintenance handled? How do tenants submit a maintenance request? Do you have a portal online that they can say, hey, something's broken, or I need this and I need that? And then how is that routed to me? How are those decisions made? Can I handle them myself as a landlord, or do you contract with a repairman or a different plumbing or whatever issue it might be? Do I have the option to handle that myself so I can save money? Do you do property walkthroughs? Is there a cost associated with that? This company in particular, they charge $85. Which is not bad if you're out of state and you need someone to just walk through the property, make sure that everything looks good. I wish I had that for my previous tenant, because I was over there every other weekend, picking things up. So basically, you want to know what actions are being taken on my behalf so that I can sleep well at night, and I know that My money is going to good use and taking care of my investment and my tenants. Now, our fourth group of questions, a level of support questions. And these are really, really important because there are a million companies out there that would love to just take your money monthly and provide absolutely no value to you as a landlord. And then you're left scratching your head. Why am I paying these people? And, I've even had that thought over the last couple months on a couple instances regarding tenant placement that I can talk about in just a second. But you want to make sure that you are feeling well supported, that your business is being valued, whether or not you have one property or 100 with them. You want to make sure that they are aligned with your goals and supporting your company, basically. So one of the best questions to ask is, do I get a dedicated property manager? Or is it just kind of a round robin, whoever picks up the phone is going to help me out? Do they know my units intimately? Do they know my tenants' names so that they can provide a high level of service to you and your property and make you feel good? Ask the property manager, if there is a dedicated one, how long have you been doing this? The one I'm worked with has been in the industry for half a decade. I think that she knows what she's doing, and I appreciate that. She knows the addresses of the properties and the tenants and some nuances that make me feel good so that I can call her directly. She picks up the phone and she knows how to help me. You want to ask about SLAs, which are service level agreements. Are there any SLAs regarding following up with tenants if they put in a maintenance request? How quickly are they going to be contacted about that? And then how quickly is that relayed to me as the owner? You just want to make sure that they are very responsive and you can feel confident that they've received your request, whatever it might be, and that they're going to follow up with you if it's 24 hours, 48 hours. In the case of my property manager, it's generally 24 hours, and which is great speed of service. And I feel really confident that whatever I ask of them, they're going to get right back with me. Now let's get into a couple tax questions to ask. Generally, a good property management company will collect state tax for you, but you need to be aware of the fact that increases the total amount of rent that you're charging out of pocket to a tenant. So if you list your rent at $1,000 and there's another 2.5% of tax, that is going to increase the total out-of-pocket due from your tenant. So you need to be aware of that so that you can fit everything in nicely and explain to your tenants what the breakdown is of their rent payment each month. Another good question to ask is, what documentation am I getting at the end of every year so that by April 15th, I can pay my taxes? Typically, it's going to be a 1099, and you want to make sure that as part of their package, they're offering that to you, and a good property management company will, so you don't have to do that by yourself. All right, eviction questions. This is a fun one. This was the main reason that I hired a property management company last year because I had to threaten eviction twice on a previous tenant, and it is a painful ordeal. It's also very expensive. Typically, it costs about $750 at minimum, and that's out of the landlord's pocket to hire a lawyer to start the eviction process. And while it's still going to cost relatively the same amount of money, a good property management company should have lawyers on staff or a relationship with a firm to handle that for you. So when it comes to evictions, you want to ask some good questions so that you know that you are covered during that process, because there's a lot of legality surrounding it. Obviously you've heard about the whole pandemic situation, the eviction moratorium, and how bad that was for not only tenants but also small-time landlords as well. So you want to make sure that you have a tight understanding of those processes and what the timelines are, the costs are, everything involved. One of the questions you can ask is, hey, how many evictions have you guys performed in the last 12 months? If they say 0, that's a bad sign, because there's something like 6,300 evictions that happen across America every day. So they need to be familiar with the state's eviction process. And it's unfortunately very common, so they should have a good answer for how that process works on their end. My property management company in particular offers a package. It's basically an insurance package that covers the eviction process. I would still have to come out of pocket to pay for it, But if the tenant is successfully evicted, then I'm covered for that cost out of pocket. And that's a really good feeling because, as I mentioned, they're very expensive. They could take multiple months. There's a lengthy court process as well. And if it does come to that, you want to make sure that you're covered. But again, on the flip side, hopefully it won't come to that because the property management company that you've used to place the tenant has done a good job, and then we will never have to cross the eviction bridge. Another thing you want to ask is about the eviction process itself. How does that work? How do you identify that a tenant needs to be evicted? Is it non-payment of rent? Is it that they've trashed the property? Is it that they've broken a clause in the lease and they can be evicted immediately and their lease be terminated? How does that process work? Who delivers the documentation? And what does the documentation say? And then what is the timeline from there? And how are you involved as an owner? How is the property management company involved? What happens to the tenant? What happens to the tenant's belongings? All of these things should be asked during the process so that you know that the property manager in that company has a good handle on their eviction process internally. Now, moving into set number 7, which is tenant placement questions. This is a really, really, really important one because it sets the stage for the entire relationship and you feeling good about the people that have moved into your expensive investment. So one of the best things that you need to ask is how that process works from start to finish, from when they first take pictures of your property. Do they take pictures of your property? And then how do they list it? What sites do they list it on? What are the costs involved for tenant placement? For my property management company specifically, it cost me about $600 or $700 to get a new tenant in there. And that does not include any potential vacancy. So it could be a very expensive endeavor, not only paying the property management company, and that's going to be taken out of your first rent check when you do get somebody in there. But if it sits for 1, 2, or more months, you're losing money. So you want to make sure that they have a very efficient tenant placement process. This was probably the only time so far that I've gotten frustrated with my property management company because they were a little bit slow in tenant placement. And I had done this, as I mentioned, for 2 years in the past, and I've placed multiple tenants. Granted, one was absolutely terrible, and I'm kicking myself still. But you want to balance with finding the right tenant and how much time it's taking, so that you don't eat too much lost profit from a vacancy standpoint. So some really good questions to ask. What is the overall tenant placement fee? Are there costs associated with the marketing effort? A lot of companies charge you for going in and taking photos. In my opinion, it was worth it. They did a great job with the photos. They did a 3D tour on the inside, which was great, especially during the pandemic. People can tour it. They know exactly what it looks like. All they need to do is just come and get a vibe for the neighborhood, and then they're sold, hopefully. And so you want to find out how the showings process works. Are they accompanying a prospective renter to the property, or a lot of times during COVID, companies would simply put a keypad on the door and then the prospective renter could tour by themselves. And I'm going to say I did not like the latter. I guess more on the traditional side, I want somebody to be doing the salesmanship with that tenant throughout the process. Hey, here's how old the appliances are. Here's some restaurants in the neighborhood. There has to be that little bit of salesmanship and make that prospective renter feel comfortable. Otherwise, they're just walking through a house by themselves, and that doesn't always give prospective renters a warm and fuzzy. So you may need to make the request, hey, I want somebody from your organization to accompany all showings, and I've made that request because that was not the initial setup. So, and hopefully they're able to accommodate that for you. So just a couple more questions around tenant placement. What's the average time that it takes to place a tenant? And especially in a hot market, if you're in an urban area, they should go pretty quick if it's priced right. You can ask them, do they do comps, area comps based on their portfolio, just any local rental, so that you can come in and have it priced right, so it's not sitting on the market for a long period of time. And then what's your renewal percentage? Do the tenants like interacting with the management company? That's a big one. Maybe they liked interacting with you as the landlord, but they hate your property management company. That's not fun either. It needs to be a symbiotic relationship for everybody involved. And are they good at renewing tenants? Do they get a lease out to them, 2-3 months in advance? Do they offer incentives, gift cards, things to entice renters to renew? What is the rental increase going to be? And then, what is the churn percentage? Basically, how many tenants that you've placed have left at the end of 1 year or 2 years? You want to know that, so that will give you a good idea of how good this property is at attrition and keeping tenants in place and happy. All right, so the 8th and final set of questions are around leases. This is super important because a lot of people just sign leases and they don't know what they're signing. They're often 10 pages long, and you as a landlord want to make sure that you are covered on absolutely everything. So one of the good questions you can ask is, hey, can I see a sample lease? Can I see the standard one that you guys use, so that I can get an idea of what my tenants are signing up for and where I'm covered, on all these different clauses. Do I have the ability as a landlord to add property specific clauses as well? Because you might have maybe a pool, you could have carports, that have different rules. You could have a shed on the property. You want to make sure that everything is cared for. What is the length of time for a typical lease? Do you do 12-month? Will you do a 6-month, which is typically not a good idea? Generally you want to go for somewhere between 12 and 18 months. And then on the back end, that gives you the ability to raise rent or, take out a crappy tenant, get in a better one. But you want to know the length of time that you're going to be potentially dealing with this tenant in place. And again, hopefully the property management company did a good job with that. Additional lease questions would be around any fees or payments that are built in to the lease. Standard is rent and the deposit. Is there anything related to late payments that is listed in the lease? What happens if a tenant needs to break the lease? Because that's a big one as well. Is there some type of formula for paying the rent owed so that they could break the lease and have it be terminated? And then what's the process in getting a new tenant in place? All right, so to recap, if you're able to ask all of these 8 sets of questions, or even a fraction of them, when you get someone on the phone, when you're calling around to find a property management company, you should feel really confident that you have a holistic understanding of their internal operations and know that you're gonna feel supported once you hire this company. So I will put a list of all the questions that I went through in this video in the description. Feel free to use those. Hopefully you found this helpful, and thank you guys so much for watching.